This video is to all of you debating on whether or not you wish to return to WoW, including my viewers who watch my videos but surprisingly don't play the game itself, whether because they are not sure if they want to play it or not, or just are still turned off from the horrible experience that they have received in Warlords of Draenor. However, this video will be for those who are considering whether or not they wish to rejoin World of Warcraft or stay away from it for good. So how this video will go is that I will be talking about the most important aspects of the game first to inform you guys of that specific topic or topics, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to summarize everything that's a pro and con within the entire video. However, do be warned though, if you are a person playing Legion right now, some of the things being mentioned will probably be quite obvious to you, but they might not be for someone who is looking to get back into WoW. So it's for that very reason that I will be trying to go over everything. Questing in Legion is pretty interesting compared to questing in previous expansions, because unlike in the past where players are forced to leave certain zones and enter other zones at higher levels, for example leaving the Howling Ford at the lower end of level 70 while questing in Icecrown at the closer end to level 80, now mobs scale exactly to your level, which allows you to quest on whichever of the 4 zones you so choose at whatever time, giving you the choice of either sticking with a zone to the end of a questline because you enjoyed the story, or giving you the option of leaving the zone halfway in because you just find that specific zone boring. Also, multi-tapping is something that has been added that makes it a lot more convenient to actually quest around a lot of different people without it actually being a nuisance. Now, when someone attacks a mob and you need the same mob for a quest or for any other reason, all you have to do is tag it as well and you too will receive credit for killing it. Another thing that I love about Legion is that there are pop-up windows whenever something important is being said by a character, which basically summarizes what's going on in the quest that you're on. Now, I particularly like this feature because even though I like lore, I tend not to read my quests at all because I'm a lazy sack of shit, so this feature being available really helps for the immersion. While also on the topic of storytelling, the questing in Legion is great because most of the zones offer really interesting quest lines that either show you new lore that you never knew before, or that reference events in the past. One of these major events being brought up is the War of the Ancients. This event is brought up a lot during your questing. This also brings me to the scenarios, which are amazing. The scenarios are not only fun, but they are very interesting to play through since they show you the story of characters you don't know too much about, or because they show you the story of how the Legion invasion is affecting everyone, even those who are far away from the Broken Isles. An example of the former is Holn High Mountain. In the War of the Ancient books, we don't hear too much about him other than that he was a fierce warrior, but in game, we see how big of a role he actually plays in the war itself. All in all, questing in Legion was pretty damn satisfying. Right off the bat, after you hit 110, in addition to having the option to immediately gear up, you also have the option to continue questing through a level 110 zone called Sewermark. This zone is basically filled with quests which will inform you of the story of a branch of the Night Elves called the Nightborn, and what horrors they have to put up with due to the Legion's arrival. This zone is also mandatory to quest in to unlock 2 dungeons and world quests. Although it is fun to go through the first time, it is not something that I will happily go through a second time or a third time on an alt. The quest chains are pretty damn long, and I wouldn't be too happy with having to do it over numerous times. Thankfully, however, there isn't really a reason to. After you unlock the dungeons from questing in Sewermark on one character, they are unlocked account-wide. However, to my knowledge, I still think you have to do the first few starting quests in order to unlock world quests on an alt. World quests are basically dailies that you complete for rewards such as gold, class order resources, and artifact power. I'd be lying if I said these were fun to do. They're not. They are a drag, they are boring, and they are a burden. The reason why it's pretty essential to do them, however, is because it's pretty much the only way to obtain order resources so that you can do missions on your class order hall command table. Also, every single day, you will have an emissary mission from one of the factions of the Broken Isles. These missions will require you to complete 4 world quest missions and then return to the emissary, where you will receive a chest containing gold or order resources as well as artifact power and a piece of low item level gear, and with a chance at giving you a legendary. The final reason is mainly the reason why most players bother with world quests to actually begin with. However, I will say though, I have been playing Legion since launch, and world quests in general are a very annoying hassle and just bothersome to put up with. Of course, you can always not do them, but you kind of have to if you want order resources or legendaries. A lot of people are kind of here and there when it comes to their opinion on class order halls. Some people like them, others hate it because it reminds them of the garrison in WoD. I have no problem with them, and the reason why I don't is because yes, it has a command table like the garrison, but it's not really similar at all other than that. In fact, it's what the garrison should have been in WoD. It offers a class campaign which, depending on your class, either yields a very interesting story or a very pointless and dull one. An example of the latter is the monk one. Holy hell, that campaign is shit. Also, instead of sending out your followers to basically do everything for you, you yourself actually have to go in the outside world and do shit yourself. For example, in WoD, you would send your followers to get you a piece of high mall gear, and that would be that. In several weeks' time, you can be sitting in raid gear without lifting more than a single finger. In Legion, however, you send your followers to get you an item associated with a raid. This item starts a quest that requires you yourself to kill a boss in that raid in order to complete the quest, which will then reward you with a piece of gear. So pretty much the class order hall makes it so that you actually have to go outside of it, unlike the garrison. Also, aside from the command table, there isn't much reason to stay in your order hall, so rest assured, it's not like in WoD where garrisons killed the major city hangout hub. Scores of people still hang out in Dalaran. One of the negative aspects that I do not like about the order halls, however, is the maintenance of order resources. This is required in order to continuously send your followers on missions, grant you new features in your order hall, and upgrade your artifact research knowledge, which will allow you to acquire artifact power faster. It's annoying to have to do things to maintain the resources constantly, especially if you're using them rather often on all of your alts. That means all your alts have to do world quests to get order resources, and it's just very time consuming and not fun. Professions, like class order halls, do very much require you to go outside in the Broken Isles in order to actually obtain recipes to level your profession. This means that you will be provided a quest chain, whether it be to kill a mob in the Broken Isles, gather a piece of equipment needed for a quest in the Broken Isles, or kill a boss in a dungeon. You'll be asked to do this in order to further your skill in your profession. Overall, I think it's a great way to get people up and off their ass rather than just crafting something daily in game and then using like 5 of those crafted items to buy a recipe like in WoD. Word of advice though, go herbalism if you like to farm and make gold. It is an excellent profession to make gold with right now. I haven't gotten into PvP too much this expansion, mainly because there's so much other things to do, and I have been devoting my time towards PvE rather than PvP since the expansion launched. However, if you haven't heard yet, there are PvP talents now available, which are a set of talents only usable when you engage in PvP combat. This is Blizzard's plan for balance between both the PvP and PvE aspects of the game. If a class isn't up to par or is too OP, they can then rework the PvP talents, which will have no effect on the PvE aspect of the class. Also, when Legion launched, Blizzard announced that PvP gear will no longer be something that's relevant, as they wanted all player stats to be normalized rather than have one person incredibly more powerful than another person because they have a full PvP set, ultimately allowing the person who has 50 item levels over another person who just hit level 110 only a slight advantage rather than just outright two-shotting them. The dungeons in this expansion are very fun in my eyes. From the music of the dungeon to who we fight to the structure of the dungeon and to the mechanics of the bosses, pretty much every aspect of most of the dungeons is fun. Only a few of them I would say are pretty dull and boring. Also, the Mythic Plus feature allows a lot of replayability when it comes to dungeons, since it is an alternative way to obtain gear other than raiding. This means that if you don't have time to raid or simply don't want to, you and 4 of your buddies, guildmates, or pugs can basically group up into a dungeon that is of difficulty higher than that of a mythic dungeon, and then receive gear at the end of the run, which will tie into the difficulty of the level of the Mythic Plus itself. For example, dungeons with a mythic level of 1 through 5 will be significantly easier, but will also yield much lower item level gear than dungeons with a level range of 10 to 15. However, this is possibly my favorite feature in Legion by far. Because of school, I don't have too much time to play, but I can still be on par with the item level of raiders by doing a Mythic Plus dungeon whenever I choose. It's an excellent alternative way to gear up if you can't raid or if raiding just doesn't appeal to you. RNG in this expansion has been the worst that it has ever been. In previous expansions, the only thing we had to worry about was whether or not the best in slot piece we wanted from a boss would drop or not. In Legion, RNG pretty much revolves around everything. On the second day of hitting 110 on my monk, I did a world quest which should have given me a piece of 840 item level gear, but instead it got Titan Forge upgraded to item level 875, which is basically the mythic item level of Emerald Nightmare, the first raid of the expansion. In addition to this, a person can do a low level mythic dungeon like say, a +4. And get gear that is better than that of a Mythic 12 if it Titan Forges. This has a lot of people riled up, stating that the gearing system in Legion is more of a slot machine, deciding whether or not you get the gear that you're gonna get, rather than your actual performance granting you the gear that you should have for something within a level of difficulty. Like me doing a world quest and literally AFKing while watching YouTube should not give me an item that's on par with a mythic raid. Legendaries in Legion are not something I'm too fond of, because they play such a significant role in your DPS, and the only way you can obtain them is once again through RNG. Whenever you kill a boss, do a raid, loot your emissary cache, you have a chance of getting a legendary, a very small chance. This is kind of annoying because in order to do the utmost best possible performance you can for your role, you need to have your best in slot legendary. As if it wasn't hard enough on its own to get any legendary by itself to drop, you also have to hope that it's going to be your best in slot one. This leads to a lot of people, including myself, constantly grinding out Mythic Plus dungeons for the chance at a legendary, but at that point, it's not even fun anymore, it's draining. Replayability only retains its value if you aren't forced to do it, but if you're raiding in a competitive guild where no one's spot is ever secure and you can get outperformed any day, you're pretty much forced to play the game as much as possible until the legendary you need will drop. Artifact power is also something that you get through pretty much everything that you do. Questing, raiding dungeons, it's unavoidable. Artifact power is basically used to obtain traits in your weapon, which will vastly increase certain spells you may have, allowing you to become much more tankier, deal more damage, or do much more healing. Every time you unlock a trait, you gain a rank, and after you get to rank 35, you stop unlocking new traits and instead start dumping all of your artifact power into a single trait. This trait, after each rank, increases your damage by a flat 0.5%, reaching up to a maximum of rank 54. The problem is that it's a huge grind to actually max out your traits through gaining artifact power. Also, in addition to this, if you have two specs you switch between, or if you're focusing on a main and an alt, it makes it much more draining since the grind is just that much worse. The fact that legendaries play such a significant role and the fact that you have to grind artifact power in order to optimize your role is one of the reasons why players regard Legion as the most alt unfriendly expansion. If you don't have the game yet and you plan on playing the game seriously, like raiding competitively, you will have to spend a lot of your time catching up with artifact power. Content in World of Warcraft has been a major concern, especially with how long Siege of Orgrimmar was out in Mists of Pandaria and how WoD basically had little content to offer the 2 years that it was out. Legion so far though is the complete opposite of that. It floods you with things you can do and should be doing, which honestly is kind of overload at times, but it's much better than having nothing to do. In addition to this, patch 7.1.5 was released about 3 weeks ago, giving us access to many things such as the Brawlers Guild, micro events which are mini holiday events, and also the raid the Nighthold, which is freaking amazing by the way. Legion so far already has the same number of raids that WoD has had in its entire lifespan. However, in addition to this, patch 7.2 is already on the PTR itself, only soon after patch 7.1 had hit the live servers. Before Legion launched, Blizzard announced that they pretty much wanted a steady stream of content throughout the whole entirety of the expansion, and although those words meant little to nothing considering what happened with WoD, so far it seems that Legion has had and will receive a lot of uptime when it comes to how much content we will be getting. Lore in Legion is pretty damn good. Tons of things are happening, many people are dying, other characters who take up the mantle of those who have died are receiving a spotlight, many characters from the past are being referenced or even brought into the game. Legion is an expansion you do not want to miss if you care about lore. The story is very interesting so far, and I wouldn't say it rivals the lore of Mists of Pandaria, not yet, but it's definitely following in its footsteps. Mists of Pandaria, whether you want to believe it or not, was a phenomenal expansion when it came to lore. If you are worrying about whether or not this expansion will have the same impact of WoD, as in no one is really sure whether or not the events in that expansion are even relevant aside from Gul'dan shining in the spotlight, don't be. Blizzard is taking the Legion invasion very seriously, and they want to have us all having the feeling that every race needs to band together to repel Sargeras' army. However, I am not happy with the fact that every player is wielding legendary artifact weapons like the Doomhammer or Ashbringer. It just kills the sense of how legendary these weapons truly were. Also, some class campaigns will end with you as the leading figurehead of the organization of your class, and that just doesn't work with an MMO. In a single player, you know, definitely, you could do that. But when you walk around and find hundreds of other people leading the same organization that you're leading, it's not something that I really care for. Alright guys, so that's basically everything that I'm going to cover about the expansion. So first let's go over the ups and pros of Legion. Questing is convenient, mobs scale to you, not the other way around. Multi-tapping makes it easier for those of you who play on large pop servers. The scenarios are very immersive, interesting, and fun. Sewermark gives you something to do at level 110 aside from gearing up. If you enjoy dailies, world quests is also something you can do. Class order halls are what garrisons should have been. Despite being in the game, they don't take away from the fact that major city hubs do exist. So this means that people still go to Dalaran and Stormwind and Orgrimmar, all that stuff. Class order halls yield story campaigns, most of which are excellent. Mythic Plus dungeons offer replayability and an alternative way to gear up. Constant uptime and flow of content being delivered both on live servers and on the PTR. Lore in Legion introduces new stories and finally feels like it can be applied to everything here on out taking place in the future, unlike WoD, whereas things felt like they had no impact whatsoever. Cons: those who feel strongly about garrisons may not like the class order hall or the command table. Everyone's walking with a Doomhammer or Ashbringer. Artifact power, regardless of the catch-up mechanic, will still be a grind. World quests could be draining, bothersome, and feel like a mandatory chore over time. RNG is out of control, leaving the feeling that acquiring gear isn't as rewarding as it should be. Legendaries play too significant of a role for you to not have them while raiding. Getting legendaries and trying to obtain best in slot legendaries will be a pain, as you will have to farm dungeons or just flat out devote a lot of time to the game in the hopes of getting the legendary piece you want. When you hit 110, you may feel overloaded with things to do, getting artifact power, running Mythic Plus dungeons, farming legendaries, questing in Sewermark, and doing world quests. The expansion is quite alt unfriendly. If you are a person who loves alt, you will be devoting a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into trying to balance everything between all of your tunes, unless of course you decide to play casually. For the casual player, they can go at their own pace and not have to worry about, you know, keeping up with the speed of everyone else. However, for the person who doesn't want to play casually, who decides to get back into the game seriously, like competitive raiding, the first few weeks will seem overloaded and you will spend a lot of time devoted into the game to make sure that you are on top with everything. Alright guys, and that's basically everything that I'm going to be covering in Legion. Hopefully that was everything that you wanted to be covered, to paint a picture in your head of whether or not you wanted to buy Legion or not. In my opinion, despite all the cons, it is a very good expansion so far. It may seem like overload with how many things that you're flooded to actually do with, but it's not an expansion that you really want to miss. However, if you do plan on getting back into the game seriously, do know that you will be devoting a lot of time towards the game. So if I were you, I'm going to school right now, I have a job or whatever, I would take the game kind of casually, you know. If you want a PvE, just make sure that you pug a normal or heroic raid every week or so, and that's pretty much it. If you're going at that pace, you don't really have to worry about anything. However, if you take the game seriously and you want to get into a really good strong guild and get, you know, server first for raid boss kills and whatnot, then you will be devoting a lot of time to the game. But that's all that I have to say about this expansion so far, guys. Overall, it's a really good expansion and the steady stream of content really promises a lot on Blizzard's part. With that having said though, guys, thank you so much for watching, and as always, peace out, take care, and have a good one.